include the race cars and everything else. But we always came together when it came to education, because we understood that it was education that, was a pathway to opportunity that made a difference in our economic growth, from our university to community colleges to our schools. And all of a sudden, we now deciding that we want to turn our schools over to profit-making corporations. Vouchers are a scheme to give public money to private for-profit companies. Let me repeat that again, to private for-profit companies. That means that public schools will have to raise class sizes and get by with less at a very time when they have been squeezed through this economic downturn unlike any time in our history. And that is just a sad commentary for states that has historically, in my years in public service, been looked at as one of the leaders in the nation for doing the things we have to do, especially at a time when we have to continue to improve, to invest, to make a difference.
Bob, I'm going to let Representative Jeter jump in, since he is over at the legislature involved in all of this. What do you have to say, Charles?
Well, I think it's easy to get into the rhetoric of, and I'll be honest, this is the biggest concern I have with being a legislator versus being on a city council, is this almost demonizing. I think on both sides on occasion. I'm not saying the Democrats only do it, or Republicans do it. I think we both do it. I'm trying to get into people's motives. I firmly believe both Democrats and Republicans want the best education system they can get. I do agree with Congressman Etheridge that there's a difference of opinion of how to get there. I don't believe for a second, as I work with my Republican colleagues, that there's any hidden agenda to kill the public school system or to kill education in general. I just firmly think that's a falsehood. Now, when we get into vouchers, when we get into charter schools, when we get into some of these other things, I think we have to understand that I'm less concerned about protecting the traditional models, and I'm more concerned about making sure that we educate our children to the best that they can be. And I think that what we're trying to accomplish is looking at ways to give flexibility within the public school system and with public monies to make sure that every child has a proper, good, and excellent education. I don't think we're in a society anymore where we can have a one-size-fits-all model. Now, do I have concerns with the voucher system to that point? Yeah, I think there's some legitimate issues on the voucher system that we need to address. But I also think there's a lot of good that can come from the voucher system if we implement it correctly. The charter schools. There's good charter schools, there's bad charter schools. I'm a big supporter of the brick and mortar charter schools. I'm a big opponent of virtual charter schools. So, I think that, everything in our society seems to be moving to a customization level of trying to make the best solution for the people. And our education system, I think, needs to be adjusted, not so we can try to kill the system, but so we can try to make it better for every child. And every child's not going to learn the exact same way in every system the way we've been doing it. But that does not mean, and I reject the notion, that means Republicans don't care about education. That's simply not true.
Well, let's take a look at the charter school issue, for example. The Senate passed a bill, and it's essentially creating a separate board for those schools to report up to. And we already know there's differences right now between charter schools and public schools. So, Bob, you were superintendent of public instruction. The new chairman, Bill Kobe, of the board, thinks that that bill might be unconstitutional. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, let me remind our listeners how we got to charter schools. When they started, they were to be in an experiment, to have an opportunity with less rules and regulations, operating under the guise of state boards of education around the country. Some of the first ones were in Baltimore. They didn't do too well and failed. But they were to have the opportunity. They were supposed to be experiments, so that they didn't have the rules and regulations. Now, we've forgotten how we started and what it was about, and now we're saying, well, that isn't enough. We really need our own rules and regulations so that we can take public money and do what we want to do. Let me just remind folks that, when you take away the dollars for schools, we can call them what we want. I can't